Until fairly recently in the history of humankind's conquest of the seven seas, your average sailor didn't actually know how to swim. As ludicrous as it sounds, it's a well-known fact, and there were 3 very good reasons why this was true. Unless they happened to live near a coastal region in a warm climate, most people in general didn't know how to swim. Swimming in general was an unpopular activity. Many seafarers at the time were actually pressed men who hadn't chosen the sailing life of their own free will. Many were lured into service while drunk as a lord at their local pub, while others were convicts who had been given very little choice in the matter. Number 2, even if one could successfully stay afloat, falling overboard was considered to be a death sentence. It took a very long time to execute a turn in a tall ship. By the time the ship could be steered back to the patch of rough sea where the unfortunate man had fallen overboard, he would be long since lost beneath the waves. Paddling around in rowing seas would only prolong the agony of drowning. It was best to just get it over with, as quickly as possible. And number 3, there were unspeakable horrors lurking in the depths of the ocean, both real and imagined. The unfortunate crews of many sunken ships have met with their doom in the jaws of the circling sharks, picked off one by one as they clung to floating debris and praying to be spared. As much as they feared the sharks, however, the sailors of the Middle Ages had even greater terrors to contend with below the rolling waves. They believed sea monsters lurked in the deep blue waters beneath them, fearsome behemoths who could suddenly erupt from the depths and drag their vessel to her watery tomb. No one in their right mind would choose to jump off the deck into the monster-infested waters below. The existence of such creatures in the current day and age may be up for debate, but if we go back much, much further in time, we find that the world's waterways were once absolutely teeming with a wide, diverse, and shudder-inducing selection of sea monsters. During a period known as the Cambrian Explosion, a wide array of aquatic species emerged in the ancient oceans. The introduction of hard outer shells allowed ocean life to grow larger, starting an evolutionary trend which set the stage for the giants who would come to rule the seas in the future. One of the top predators of the Cambrian period was a shrimp-like monstrosity over 3 feet in length. This nightmarish carnivore would seize one end of its prey with its hook-lined mouthparts and use its appendages to rapidly flex the other end of the animal back and forth. A savage assault that would rupture the prey's exoskeleton. During the Ordovician period, which succeeded the Cambrian, some species of the cone-shaped cephalopod known as nautiloids could grow 20 feet in length. These mollusks were ambush predators, anchoring their unwary prey with the short tentacles that protruded from the opening in their protective shell, and ripping them to shreds with a large, powerful beak. By the time of the Jurassic and subsequent Cretaceous periods, the oceans were dominated by a multitude of astonishing creatures, many of them enormous in size. There were fish longer than a school bus, marine reptiles with giraffe-like necks or long serpentine bodies, and furry, crocodilian monstrosities, who were an early ancestor of modern whales. Throw in a species of turtle that weighed as much as a pickup truck, and it's safe to say the Jurassic and Cretaceous periods were dominated by giants. The upper links of the oceanic food chain were populated by animals of staggering size. In these decidedly strange and dangerous times, the oceans would have been a source of great peril for anyone attempting to traverse their fathomless depths in a boat. Of course, this would not happen for tens of millions of years after these fantastic beasts went extinct. But is it possible that a few descendants of these sea monsters of yore have lingered into the modern age? Is there a chance that oversized marine creatures may still be inhabiting our rivers, lakes, and oceans? The mythology and folklore of most seafaring cultures include at least one reference to some kind of sea monster. The Hebrew Bible speaks of Leviathan, an underwater titan that ate at least one whale a day, and the Roman nationalist Pliny the Elder claimed that either a squid or an octopus of gigantic proportions was seen stealing fish from pickling tubs on the coast of Spain. The thieving monster was caught red-handed, and a desperate struggle ensued, with the invader fending off its attackers by lashing them with its 30-foot tentacles. It was eventually overwhelmed by a crowd of fishermen wielding 3-pronged spears, and its body was carefully preserved as a curiosity. The dissected corpse reportedly weighed over 700 pounds. Norse mythology brings us the Kraken, a brute the size of a small island that lived off the coast of Norway and Greenland. It would feed by simply opening its enormous mouth and allowing multitudes of curious sea creatures to swim inside. It was thought that the Kraken was constantly surrounded by hungry schools of fish, which fed on its excrement. According to the legends, fishermen would sometimes tempt fate and cast their nets where the beast lay submerged many fathoms below, as they would be guaranteed to haul in a plentiful catch that day. Although the Kraken was not generally characterized as being malignant in nature, Norse sailors treated it with the utmost respect, as an angry Kraken could easily drag the largest of ships beneath the waves. Sea serpents are another common trope in sea monster mythology. People all over the world have been reporting encounters with sea serpents for thousands of years. The Greek geographer and historian Strabo wrote of an eyewitness account made by his fellow naturalist Posidonius on the northern coast of the Levant, writing that Posidonius encountered a fallen dragon roughly 100 feet in length. Posidonius is quoted as saying that the serpent was so wide through its body that, quote, the horsemen standing by it on either side could not see one another, and its jaws were so large enough to admit a man on horseback, and each flake of its horny scales exceeded an oblong shield in length. Nordic sailors also recorded a number of hair-raising encounters with sea serpents. The Scandinavian writer Olaus Magnus wrote the following passage in his 15th century opus, History of the Northern Peoples. Quote, a serpent of fearsome size, 200 feet long and 20 feet wide, resides in the rifts and caves outside of Bergen. On bright summer nights, the serpent leaves the caves to eat calves, lambs, and pigs, or it fares out to the sea and feeds on sea nettles, crabs, and similar marine animals. It has long hair hanging from its neck, sharp black scales, and flaming red eyes. It attacks vessels, grabs and swallows people as it lifts itself up like a column from the water. Sea monsters of many different varieties have been making an occasional appearance all the way up to the present day. Much like their predecessors from the folklores of our ancestors, many of these sea monsters bear more than a passing resemblance to species of marine life that has supposedly been extinct for tens or even hundreds of millions of years. The Loch Ness Monster in Scotland bears more than a passing resemblance to a plesiosaur, while the infamous Canadian lake monster known as Ogopogo is reminiscent of a Mesosaurus, a snake-like reptile from the late Cretaceous period. Descriptions of the legendary Mokelebembe of southern Africa evoke the image of a water-dwelling miniature brontosaurus, and the bunyip of Australian Aborigine folklore would be right at home with the mammalian megafauna that ruled the southern continent 100,000 years ago. These are just a few examples of the dozens of aquatic cryptids that have been reported by witnesses in the past 200 years. There are also many more, far too many to squeeze into a single video. It is sufficient to say that numerous people have seen things in the water that they could neither identify nor rationalize away with an alternate explanation. With the sheer volume of these claims coming as they do from all walks of life all over the world, it is worth considering that perhaps there are creatures living in our waterways that the scientific community has yet not discovered. Alternatively, there could be a number of life forms that we've long considered to be extinct, which are actually still kicking around in the present. This has happened before in the not-so-distant past, most notably with an ugly and unpleasant-tasting prehistoric fish known as the coelacanth. A specimen of this supposedly extinct species was discovered among a South African fisherman's daily catch in December of 1938. The coelacanth is a good example of the Lazarus taxon, an evolutionary line that seems to have disappeared from the fossil record, only to reappear much later. It is completely possible that at least a few of the sea monster encounters which have been reported in recorded history are legitimate brushes with prehistoric megafauna, or perhaps even an aquatic animal that remains completely unknown to mankind. Of course, there are many forms of marine life that would seem completely alien to someone who's unfamiliar with their appearance. The giant oarfish is a prime example. It is an elongated snake-like fish that is rarely seen in the wild and could be easily mistaken for a sea serpent by someone who doesn't know what they're looking at. The giant squid is another strong candidate for mistaken identity. An effect known as abyssal gigantism allows the giant squid to reach lengths of 40 feet or more, and it would certainly seem like a monstrous creature of legend to your average medieval sailor, especially an inner-city peasant who had never even seen the ocean before they'd been unwittingly coerced into accepting the king's shilling and were pressed into service. To date, there has been no physical proof brought to light which strongly supports the existence of these fantastic beasts of the ocean depths. Despite claims to the contrary, all evidence thus far has been anecdotal in nature. However, enough of these unsubstantial claims have been made to warrant the consideration of all possibilities, no matter how unlikely they may seem. The discovery of the coelacanth is a reminder to keep our skepticism at least somewhat in check. The Earth is very old, and the oceans are very vast. Many of the deeper areas remain largely unexplored. It is possible that pockets of ancient marine life managed to survive the KT extinction event at the end of the Cretaceous period. Living fossils that preserved for countless generations into our present era. As unlikely as it sounds, there may still be a kraken slumbering in the dark waters off the coast of Norway, an unstoppable behemoth who may someday awaken and come surging up to the surface. It's easy to dismiss such fanciful ideas when one is sitting comfortably on dry land. But out on the rolling waves of the endless blue sea, this train of thought might be a little more difficult to banish from your mind. The oceans are still very much a mystery, and they will remain a mystery for many years to come. What may or may not lie within our fathomless depths is still up for debate. There are likely many strange life forms that have yet to be discovered. All of them sea monsters in their own right. We can only hope these undiscovered creatures will be disinclined to dragging our ships to their doom. Hey there kids, it's me, Mrcreepypasta, and I wanted to tell you all thank you so much for listening to tonight's story, or watching tonight's story if you're on YouTube. If you're not on YouTube, that means you're probably on the podcast that's available on iTunes, on the Google Play Store, and is now actually available on Spotify, and doesn't use as much data. So, hey, that's a thing. If you guys aren't listening on YouTube or Spotify, then I have no idea how else you could have found me. Unless you found one of those books on Amazon. You know, the Creepypasta Collection, Volume 1, Volume 2. Those are things too. Oh well, I don't know how you would have heard me there, seeing as this was recorded like 2 years after those came out. Well, anyway. Thanks for listening, folks. And sweet dreams.